I'm on a mission to recreate every Apex Legends character as a LEGO minifigure. So far I've done Lifeline, Octane, Bloodhound, Ash, Watson, Revenant, and Vantage, and in the last video the wheel decided that the next character to do is Crypto. But before I start on Crypto, I have some housekeeping to do. Long-term viewers will know that when I did the Lifeline minifigure, I didn't have access to the Mechafig Blender extension at the time and didn't think to do extensive Photoshop adjustments after the fact. This is why the original Lifeline pose was so rigid in comparison, so I went back and I essentially redid the Blender segment of the Lifeline figure from scratch, using the UV files from my first attempt. Posing it was still fairly difficult, and I was surprised with how little of an improvement it made for this specific pose after everything. I really didn't like how inaccurate the hairpiece was the first time I put it together, so I went through a lot of effort to fix it this time around. I went into this with the idea that the headband and hairpiece would form a single molded headpiece, which is a different approach to how I did it the first time, but I think it's more accurate and looks much better. Anyways, moving on to Crypto. I used young Boba Fett's face print as a base, because I thought his eyebrows and mouth print would work well for Crypto. I moved his left eyebrow down, made him look to his left, and narrowed his eyes a little before removing the skin creases, and started on his metallic features. I experimented with how detailed to make the metallic specs, and I think I strayed more on the overly detailed side, but I think it looked a little strange with any less details, so I went with a thin black outline for them. I also decided that the headpiece itself should be a dark bluish grey with the face and skin tone printed onto it. This is mainly to get the neck section to be the right colour, plus I think it just looks right. For the torso print, there were a few things I needed to consider for it. The first thing is the big white coat and how far it extends towards the top of his shoulders. I saw a custom Crypto figure before, as well as this Bane one that uses this custom cloth piece that extends well beyond their shoulders, and I think it looks amazing and is probably the best way to replicate his coat. But LEGO have never done this type of cloth piece before. It's very custom, and more importantly, replicating it with my render would be extremely difficult and would most likely look pretty bad with my process. I'm much more confident that printing it onto the torso directly would look better, plus it's at least different and a new take on the character in this form, instead of just recreating what others have done. The second thing to consider would be those hexagonal sections towards the bottom of his coat. The temptation with these was just to draw these super thin dark grey lines in a crisscross pattern and just call it close enough, but I wasn't happy with that solution because I think there's a limit to how thin these lines can get before they become unrealistically detailed. So my solution was instead to make these sections consist of these large dark grey backgrounds, which are then completely filled, and then print on the negative space by printing a load of white circles onto the grey. I thought this was a pretty neat little solution to the problem, even though it was really simple in hindsight. The next issue with the torso was with colouring. There's a discrepancy between the in-game model and the concept art around the belt buckles on his torso. The concept art has this pretty strong blue colour spread across him, but the in-game model has just a regular metal colour. But the character has a decent few specks of blue on him, like on the two machine things attached to his chest. And I thought it would look bad to introduce such a strong primary colour to the print in just these two tiny areas. So I decided to go with the concept art version for this, and I'm glad I did because it really balances out the blue nicely. I also used a slightly more vibrant orange for his necklace and vest laces, just for the sake of balancing out the darker colours of his vests. It just felt right. It's kind of hard to articulate why. His hip print was uncomfortably simple. All I had to do was continue the coat print into the legs, and add some detail for one of his many belts. I didn't like how plain the white sections are each side of the print details, but adding detail there just looked even weirder. Ultimately it is just a bridge to the leg sections, so I guess it doesn't matter too much. There was nothing too complicated about his right leg print, to be honest. I lined it up pretty well first try, and the bottom of his coat didn't have a lot of detail to include anyway. I was wary of the line where the dual molded legs split into the two colours, and spaced the details accordingly, but even that wasn't overly complex. From the knee down, the print was really simple. Honestly, I probably could have gotten away with not printing it at all, but I like what I ended up with. I added the blue buckle details here as well, just to keep the colours balanced with the torso. Same thing with the speck of orange on the latch things. His left leg was just a copy and paste job. It required a little changing just to get it lined up properly and to not look overly symmetrical, but it was super quick either way. His right arm was actually more detailed than I expected. It had a lot of sections packed into a very small area, which was difficult to manage with the limited space between the two colour molds. I kind of guessed where each mold started, and I think I just got lucky in that it lined up first try. And his left arm was again just a copy and paste job. I had a pretty good idea as to what to do for his drone micro build for a while, so putting that together didn't take too long. I found what I think is a boomerang piece, and that worked really well for the angled wings of the drone, so I just used that alongside a door handled stud piece and called it a day. It is missing some colour, but at this scale it's as good as we can get without making it overly bulky. I do want it to scale as much as possible with the figures. Posing him wasn't the worst, but it was frustrating to try and get his arm to look like he has his hand in his pocket. I deleted his left hand altogether and tried to angle his arm to be as inward facing as possible, but Megafig just doesn't allow you to bend it in the way that I want. This isn't the first time I had this problem with the program, but it always sucks to compromise the pose because of what feels like a huge oversight with the rig itself. I'm not incredibly happy with the way his left arm is posed because of this, but I think it gets the point across about as well as Vantage's right arm at least. I gave him a comically oversized gun before rendering and moving on to the Photoshop adjustments. As these adjustments go, this was probably the simplest to date, excluding Octane. All I needed to do was remove the shadow from his face, using the same technique I used for Vantage, and chop the end off his Uzi to make it at least resemble his square pistol a bit more. And with that, there you go, the final render. And here he is in the family photo, alongside the new and improved Lifeline. I think I expected him to be easier, maybe just because I think he has the coolest design in the game, but the difficulties with finding his hairpiece and angling his arm made the process slightly suboptimal. And now we spin the wheel to decide the next character. Before I do that though, I will say that the next custom character video most likely won't be from Apex Legends. I do want to expand into other games and stuff as soon as possible, so I'm spinning for the next Apex character, not necessarily the next character. Oh fuck. Fuck. Okay, well at least he's not next.